Well, tonight's the night, but is it happening again? What is up, guys? Welcome to my spoiler review for Dexter Resurrection episodes 1 and 2. If you are a subscriber to Paramount Plus, both of the first 2 episodes of this little revival series has already dropped. It dropped last night at like 11 or midnight Eastern. And those of you that are watching on Showtime, I think it's dropping tonight. But nonetheless, I've seen the first 2 episodes of the show. I've been highly anticipating it, both with curiosity as well as a little bit of worry. And now we're going to dissect everything. So I'm going to give you some of my spoiler-free impressions first for those of you that may have not seen it yet or are waiting for Showtime to drop it, so you can get a little bit of what I think about it without getting into details. And then, of course, I'm going to dive into all of the spoiler details, all the plot elements, everything that happened in the first 2 episodes. But before I get into that, just very quickly to kind of set the stage for those of you that might be watching me for the very first time, I have done a lot of Dexter coverage on this channel. I've reviewed every single individual season of the original run. I reviewed every single episode as it aired when Dexter New Blood came out. Had a very, very highly viewed video where I just lost my mind and ranted about how much I hated the end of Dexter New Blood, where a lot of you guys found me. A lot of people subscribed from that video. And I've done a number of rankings after New Blood dropped, two of which are some of my highest viewed videos in the entire history of this channel. So a lot of you guys that are some of my awesome subscribers are big Dexter fans. And this year's been kind of a treat so far. We've had 2 different Dexter revival series. We had Original Sin earlier, which was a pleasant surprise. Wasn't perfect, definitely had some issues, but was a nice little, mostly return to form. And now we have this, which is continuing off of the end of Dexter New Blood. And on its surface, it seemed to be the Harrison spinoff show that they very clearly wanted to do and then realized how many people hated Harrison. And it has since been retooled into Dexter coming back to life and kind of combining those 2 show ideas together. At least that's my assumption. But yes, as far as Dexter Resurrection, with the fact that we have had 2 of the worst endings, in my opinion, in television history, but the fact that I absolutely love Dexter when it is fired on all cylinders, I've been cautiously optimistic of Dexter Resurrection. All of my guards have been up. I certainly don't think that they have earned my trust, maybe gained a little bit of it back with Original Sin. But with the more details that have come out about this, the trailer and everything like that, I've been very, very curious on what exactly this show was going to do. Is it going to recapture some of that classic Dexter magic? Is it going to be too much like New Blood? Is the writing going to be contrived as all hell? Is it even going to make sense that he's alive? How am I going to like Harrison here? What's going on with all these multiple serial killers that we're apparently going to be introduced to this season? So many questions. And what I will tell you as far as my spoiler-free impressions, for those of you that may not want to stick around for all of the nitty-gritty details if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes yet, is that so far, while there have absolutely been some contrivances that we're going to get into, and I'm hoping that's going to be just a necessary little speed bump for some much greater things later on, so far, 2 episodes in, I'm on board. Dexter Resurrection has hooked me more and certainly faster than Original Sin and especially New Blood have. I'm still not waving the white flag just yet, surrendering and saying, yep, you've got me back. You're right back into the greatness of the first 4 seasons. Nothing like that, at least not yet. But so far, I'm really digging what I'm seeing. I'm very intrigued. I'm highly anticipating the 3rd episode dropping. And I think there's reasons to be very cautiously optimistic going forward that maybe they've learned some lessons. Maybe we're in for a real treat here. I think they've done a really good job so far at kind of blending a lot of different styles together. You have some of that modern sensibility that they had with the style of Original Sin, with a lot of needle drops and some of the ways that they visualized dreams and, apparitions and things like that. Things that are going on inside the character's head is certainly something different than we've seen in the classic Dexter original 8-season run. I think they've brought over so far a nice amount of charm and some of that dark humor from the original show that was almost completely absent in New Blood. And yet we're still getting some of that cinematic flair that they had in New Blood that I'm still a little bit on the fence with. I'm not really a fan of it being letterboxed. I like it better when it's the full screen like it was when it was in Miami. But the way that they have the title screen very quickly come up, and they have quick flashes of certain scenes of the events we're going to see in the episode, and then you'll see like some kind of a graphic of the title of the episode somewhere in the original image that we're first introduced to when the episode starts. All that stuff is kind of cool. So I'm intrigued with how they're blending all these different styles together to make Dexter Resurrection something that very clearly is trying to recapture some of the magic of early Dexter while very much stylistically standing on its own. And I think it's doing a better job of that than they did in New Blood. New Blood, I was absolutely on board, and somebody that was saying from the beginning, this should feel different than the original show. It should have its own identity. It should have its own vibe to it. It should have its own look to it. But unfortunately, all the decisions they made in those regards, I didn't like as much as the original show. I felt like a lot of the personality, a lot of the charm of the show was missing, and New Blood was very, dare I say, stale. It was a little bit too quiet and gray. And I think Dexter Resurrection so far has been a nice compromise where you have some of that original Dexter charm, not quite to the degree of Miami or some of the early, more humorous seasons, but bringing enough of that over while letting New York City definitely have its own energy that it's bringing to the show, and not to the point of the little small town in New Blood where it's just like this barren little kind of redneck town with a lot of snow everywhere. This is New York City. This is the city that never sleeps. So I think there's a lot of potential there that things they're going to do that is very New York themed might have its own version of charm that Miami always brought to the original run. All of the returning characters that we've got so far, I think the performances so far are outstanding. It's especially great to see David Zayas back as Batista, and I love that he just slips right back into that hat. La Pasión never even left that man. So that's very cool. Of course, Michael C. Hall, he's always great. Even in the bad seasons of Dexter, he's never the problem. And Jack Alcott as Harrison, look, I never blamed the actor for what I didn't like about Harrison. It was always the writing. It was making him this whiny, bitchy little kid. I really like what they're doing with him so far. Like, just 2 episodes in, honestly, even halfway through the first episode, I was like, I'm invested in Harrison. I like this version of Harrison. I've totally forgotten the fact that I hated his character by the end of New Blood. So they have really turned him around so far. And the last thing that I'll say here in the spoiler-free section is that there's a lot of moving parts so far, and I think it's going to get a little bit less chaotic now that we're out of the first 2 episodes, now that we're kind of setting the stage and we're not worrying so much about writing ourselves out of the ending of New Blood and setting up all the chess pieces for this season. I think by episode 3, maybe episode 4, we're really going to get into this groove. And I like all the things that they're setting up. I like the character arc that we have so far with Dexter and where we're finding him post his son shooting him. I really like what's going on with Harrison, as I just said. I think that it's a sensible little change, or at least an evolution of the Harrison that we knew from what was just 10 weeks ago in the show's canon. And I'm intrigued to see what's going to go on with him, and eventually when him and Dexter are face to face again, how that relationship is going to be different given what happened at the end of New Blood. I think the little bit that we're setting up, which we don't have a lot of yet with the Uma Thurman character, which is eventually going to lead to Peter Dinklage and all the other serial killers that we saw in the trailer. I'm intrigued with that so far. And most of all, the thing that I was worried the most about, honestly, is the thing that I am most excited for seeing how they develop it out, and that is Batista and his relationship with Dexter and his position in all of this. Because thus far, and I'll elaborate more on this, I really like the way that they're playing very coy with whether or not Batista is yet again just completely oblivious and aloof to what is going on, and Dexter is going to slip right through his fingers, or give him some bullshit that he's just being there as a concerned friend, maybe with some questions but not suspicions. Or is Batista totally bought in on what Angela told him and what years ago LaGuerta told him, and he is fully on Dexter's ass, but he's playing very cool and careful about it? I'm very curious to see what the answer is and how that plays out. So that kind of wraps up all my spoiler-free talk. Now we're just going to get into the events of the episode, and I'm not going to go beat by beat like in sequential order. I've kind of just sectioned this off into things going on with certain characters. But with episode 1, which was, what was it titled? It was titled A Beating Heart, in reference to Dexter's literal beating heart. It pretty much kicks off with Dexter being on the hospital bed, as you would expect. And very interestingly, the show opens up with a lot of guest appearances where Dexter is imagining or dreaming about the Trinity Killer, about Miguel Prado, about Dokes. And, there was a lot of speculation when they were announcing that John Lithgow and Jimmy Smits and Eric King were going to come back on like what size roles they were going to be. I think anybody with common sense knew it was going to be just like a quick little flash. Maybe we'll get more of them. And I would be very curious to see if they keep returning throughout this series as like an inner voice, like how Deborah was, how Harry has always been. If once in a while we see Trinity Killer pop up into his head, that would be very cool. And I would absolutely be on board for that. But most likely this is all we're getting. But I liked it because it wasn't just a flash. It wasn't like in New Blood when they announced John Lithgow was coming back and he was on screen for 10 seconds and had one line. This was a full-on conversation where, obviously this is inside of Dexter's head, so he's talking with himself, but you have the Trinity Killer kind of calling him on some of his bullshit and saying about how it was really more his fault what happened with Rita and now what's happening with Harrison. You can't just escape this as blaming it on me. And then Miguel coming in also, and it was great to see Jimmy Smits back. I feel like Miguel's a very underrated villain from the original run, so I loved seeing him back and the conversation that had. And then, surprise, motherfucker, Dokes comes in.
Go to him, Morgan. Otherwise, you really are just some creep motherfucker.
I hope we get more Dokes. If I'll take any three, I want Dokes to come back in different little conversations of the three, because I just love that character, and we were robbed so much with him being taken out in season 2. But while I kind of chuckled at how many people were probably going to be upset that all 3 of our cameos was literally what opened the show and likely we're not going to see them again, I thought it was done pretty well. And then, there's a lot of different scenes going on where eventually he's, it's showing him healing in the hospital. Eventually he does wake up, and it's intercut with Harrison. We'll talk about Harrison in a minute, where he's going through rehab. He's learning to walk again. He's been in a coma for 10 weeks. But eventually you get to the really interesting part of this, which is when, I forget the guy's name, but the deputy or whatever, who is now the sheriff, comes in, and Dexter's like asking the question the whole time, like us viewers are, like, why am I not in a prison hospital right now? Like, what exactly happened? And I feel like this is the section of episode 1 that is deservedly going to get the most criticism, because they really lay it thick with the plot conveniences here. So essentially the explanation that Dexter is given, and we as viewers are given, is that, he said, hey, Angela left this for you. It's an envelope, and it's a picture of her and her friend that was murdered by Kurt Caldwell that, fueled her becoming a sheriff and fueled her desire to try to solve this decade-long mystery that nobody would buy into. And on the back, there's a note that says, now we're even, now get the fuck out of Iron Lake. And he elaborates a little bit further. He's like, oh, yeah, Angela felt so bad. She left the force. She took her daughter and just, left Iron Lake completely. And she felt bad that she shot you in the woods because she took credit for or took the blame for what Harrison did. And she saw that, in your cell that Coach Logan had shot at you and you killed him, obviously out of self-defense. Bullshit. Okay. Absolute bullshit. Again, like I said earlier, I'm hoping this is just a speed bump on the way to a really great show. They wrote themselves into a really bad corner with New Blood. Obviously, they intended that to be the end of the series. They did not have the foresight that show was going to do the gangbusters numbers that it did, and that a few years later they were going to be coming back to Dexter. They did not leave themselves any room to write themselves out of that. So they had a struggle on their hands, and that was the biggest concern that I had walking into this, is how you are going to sell me as a viewer on the logic of all of this. Not just that he's alive, but he's whatever's happening. Who's driving him to the hospital? What's going to happen with him and Angela and Batista? How is he not going to be in handcuffs immediately? You need to answer all of that. Did they do a good job at that? I would not say yes. I would not say it's horrible. I think on paper, the explanation of Angela giving him a little bit of a break, or at least giving him a head start as a reward for him solving the Kurt Caldwell thing. Presumably, I'm sure she assumes he took out Kurt Caldwell, but nonetheless, he at least led her to that museum of death and validated her 2-decade long investigation. And now she can rest. She can let her friend rest. Like, that is a huge thing that he gave to her. And again, I wish they would have capitalized on that with New Blood. There was so much more to do there. I did a live stream, which I'll link up here if I remember, where me and my buddy Charles, we gave kind of our own alternate endings to New Blood, and I leaned very heavily on that. So the idea of Iris, no, not Angela. Iris was the name of a friend. The idea of Angela giving him a break and letting him go because of that, I don't hate. What I hate is the way they executed it. I don't know why we couldn't get Angela back. I don't know if the actress just wasn't interested. I don't know if they didn't approach her. I don't know if she wasn't able to. But I feel like we should have gotten a scene between Dexter and Angela that could have gotten all of this, and it would have been a more interesting, intriguing, tension-filled scene, and not just an exposition dump. Like, give us the same information with Angela coming to him whenever he's awake and saying, like, he thinks, oh, this is it. I'm going to prison now. This is it. You've found me out. Now my life's over. And her essentially letting him think that for a second and then saying, I'm going to give you a break because of this. I've taken the blame for this. Get the fuck out of Iron Lake, whatever she said, but a conversation between those two characters, not just the, Mr. Magoo character coming in and telling him all of this. The piece of all that doesn't work no matter what is him killing Logan. Like, even if she leaned on maybe giving him a break because of that, as soon as she finds that Logan was killed, I feel like that would have been kaput right there. But nonetheless, does it completely work? No. Are some people going to hate it? Understandably, absolutely, and I have no defenses for it. All I can tell you is that I expected the explanation to be bullshit. I just hope that's the most bullshit we're going to get, and now we can move on. Like, we've wrote ourselves out of that corner. We did it in kind of a sloppy way. Now let's try to move on and do some really cool shit. Then we move on eventually to Batista being there, where he comes back from some kind of rehab and Batista's sitting there, and we get the longer version of the scene we got in the trailer, obviously, where Batista's like, it's like seeing a ghost. And what I really liked about this is that him and Dexter are very unsure of each other. And it really felt like Batista's kind of playing the Dexter game now, because Dexter definitely had relationships with these people, especially Batista, but there was parts of him where he's putting on a show. And he's bullshitting people, and he's manipulating people. And it felt like in this scene, they were both doing that, and they're both doing it very well. Where he asks Dexter for an explanation. Dexter gave the same explanation he gave to Angela about, like, I was just surrounded by death after the death of my wife, and then the death of my sister. I just had to get the fuck out of there. I had to restart. I could not be in Miami anymore. And it's the same type of just enough believability that would always get him out of a tight spot. When Dexter is trying to weasel his way out of something. But there was just a little bit of subtle acting by David Zayas that I really enjoyed, where he's very clearly emotional about a lot of this. He asks him a little bit about what happened with Deb. All I had that was left at the end was a little security footage of you pulling her out of the hospital. And why Jim Lindsay? Why here? He does just good enough of a job to give him enough plausible deniability. And what I love about the way that David Zayas is playing this character and the way that they're writing him, as I said earlier, is that I think they're playing very coy, where you could look at his performance and say, oh, this is Batista being Batista, where he's going to believe this. There might be a little bit of a question mark left, but for the most part, he's going to buy Dexter's bullshit, and we're going to move on from this. But there's just enough there where it feels like he's playing Dexter, and he's trying to get information, and he definitely believes that he's the Bay Harbor Butcher, or at least believes there's enough now to fully pursue this in the way that LaGuerta never was able to, and clearly Angela was not able to close the door with, that he's going to play the long game with him. And I think ultimately that's what Dexter Resurrection, whether this is 2, 3, 4 seasons long, I think that's ultimately what we're going to build to, is this is going to be 2 to 4 seasons of building to Dexter versus Batista, where they're probably going to work together and be friends here and there. There's going to be exchanges where it feels like Batista knows more than he's letting on, or Dexter is cautious about Batista. But I think eventually we're going to slowly bring characters back like Masuka, most likely Joey Quinn, any of the surviving Miami Metro characters. And it's going to build to hopefully a great resolution where finally the Miami Metro characters are going to learn the truth about Dexter. And the Bay Harbor Butcher is finally going to be truly unmasked. And what type of situation that leads to, I don't know. but I love the potential of all of that. So while in the trailer, I was extremely like put off for like, why is Batista acting oblivious here? Why is Dexter just hauling ass out the window? Like, this is so weird. This doesn't make any sense to me. In the actual context of the show, I thought the sequence was great. And even the way that, I like the way that they created a little tension there where Batista is going to come back right away the next day at visiting hours. And Dexter hears somebody say something about Harrison that sets him off that I need to go save my son. And it creates a situation where I need to leave now, even if it puts me at risk of setting off alarm bells with Batista. I think that was a good enough explanation to kind of kick this off. Moving over to Harrison. So Harrison is working at this hotel. He seemingly is like secretly staying in hotel rooms that are empty overnight that's kind of given to him by this coworker that he has a little bit of a friendly relationship with. But he's haunted by killing his dad. He's haunted by his dark urges, which is the thing that I always said was one of the most bullshit elements of that being a satisfying ending to the character. If New Blood was the ending, is like, how is him shooting his dad supposed to heal him? Like that's going to do anything but. So I'm glad they're acknowledging that. I'm curious what's going on with him and this coworker. Seems to be just a friendly flirtation right now, but I'm sure that's going to go into a full-blown relationship. And I think it's intriguing that he's got a little bit of a relationship budding with her son. Dexter always worked really well with kids, and so I'm sure Harrison's probably going to feel the same way, where he kind of struggles having relationships with people his own age. And, we'll see what happens there. But the big thing going on with Harrison is that he's working at this hotel, and he ends up in a situation where this guest is very clearly about to assault a drunk woman. And at first, I like the fact that he's kind of just trying to turn a blind eye, like it's not your problem, don't get involved. And he ends up being forced to. Like his conscience gets the better of him, and he kicks open the door and runs in. And I really liked how this scene played out, because it fully made me on board for Harrison as a character. Because in New Blood, he was such a little fucking psychotic prick. Like, you understand a lot of his antagonistic attitude towards his dad and a lot of his bitterness, but they just always, every episode just made him whiny, made him fucking cantankerous and angsty. He has that whole situation with the shooter at his high school where he manipulates it and basically tries to kill the kid, and the kid's just like this poor bullied guy. And even the way that he snaps the dude's arm in wrestling, like there was never a point in Dexter New Blood where you really felt for Harrison, or you felt like this kid is worth saving, or like all you really had is like a little bit of sympathy there, knowing that Dexter has caused a lot of the misery in his life. I think so far they're doing a much better job at writing him as a character that you actually like and can get behind. And this is one of the big moments where his dark passenger comes out to save somebody. And I like the moment where he beats the guy down, gets him to submit, and get like, okay, fine, take her to her room, I'm done. And then he starts to mouth off saying there's always going to be more, and just lets him know like, yep, this is going to happen to somebody else. And he just grabs that lid off of the toilet and just ends that shit right there. I like that scene a lot. I like the fight. And so that was a really good, that was a good way to fully get me on board for Harrison now, a character that I used to despise. And I like how, like sometimes with Dexter, his impulse would get a hold of him, and then all of a sudden, as soon as the adrenaline comes down, he's like, oh, fuck. How am I going to get out of this? And seeing him start to flash back to what he learned in that one kill table scene with Kurt Caldwell and trying to apply that knowledge to this body was great. The way that they intercut it and edited it there, where he gets rid of the girl and goes and gets all the supplies from around the hotel and uses the shower curtain liner and everything. And I'm here to tell you, the scene where he's chopping up the body and they show the head and everything like that being, bisected off of the body and everything, that might be the goriest scene, the goriest image we've ever gotten in this show. Like, it was shocking in a cool way where I was like, damn, that looks real. So that was pretty wild. And I even like the fact, I've seen some people call out the fact that this has needle drops in a negative way, like Original Sin did. And I like the fact that they're at least weaving it into the story a little bit, where Harrison keeps putting in his earbuds when he's trying to do something that's like a part of a routine. So I didn't mind that at all. But yeah, that whole situation that's set up here where Harrison does a kill, his dark passenger has done the same thing to him that it does to Dexter. and he's able to just get rid of all of it. But he has that moment of humanity where after he has disposed of the body, seemingly he throws up. I like that there's a little bit of his character that's more conflicted than Dexter ever was. Like, he doesn't really want to embrace the dark passenger the way that Dexter always didn't have a choice. And he didn't really have an emotional reaction at all to killing people. So again, having him have ties to his father, but in a different way. He's got a little bit more humanity, a little bit more potential to get out of this situation than Dexter ever had. So I think they're setting up a really interesting thing going on there with Harrison. Eventually we get introduced to Uma Thurman's character, where she breaks into somebody's house or apartment and is looking for something, and it's eventually revealed to be the trophies of presumably a serial killer. The same way that Dexter would hide his blood slides, this person was hiding a bunch of IDs with like a bloody X over the face. And I've enjoyed so far the way that they're just kind of giving us breadcrumbs about the Uma Thurman character and whatever little society she's tied to. I'm very intrigued with that. We also have a scene where we're introduced to this detective character who seems to be a little eccentric, where she's wearing headphones. They're, a body, one of the body parts that Harrison put in this trash bag fell out onto this little trash hanger, and so they're going through trying to find the bags that match, and they eventually put the body together, very similar to like the ice truck killer's body in season 1 of Dexter. I'm not so sold on this detective character. There's something about the way that she's so eccentric that is odd to me. I really don't like the trope of the super savvy detective having like certain tics and things like that. Like, it's something that's very tired at this point. So that's the one part of this episode of a character that is new that I'm really not on board with so far. Not that I hated it, but of all of the new things we're being introduced to, that one felt the most like, what's going on with this detective? What is her deal? So yeah, not sure where that's going to go, but that is eventually what gets the information out that tips Dexter off, where he hears from his physical therapist that a body was found in New York and it was cut into 9 pieces. And he's like, wait a minute, what? And he looks into it and he realizes it very much fits the way that he taught Harrison to dispose of a body with Kurt Caldwell. So to me, that was a well-written little way to get him to not only leave and head to New York, but also kind of put at risk whatever he's building with Batista, and maybe put Batista having a little bit more of a target on his back now, kind of confirming some of his suspicions. Really, the only thing else I can think about in this episode that's worth talking about is the convenience of Dexter hauling ass on Batista, getting a truck and going to New York and finding Harrison very quickly. It didn't bug me. It didn't bug me near as much as the contrivances of how we're going to erase the ending of New Blood and start this new resurrection storyline. I don't think it leans so much onto annoying contrivance as that. Is it convenient that he's driving around New York City, one of the busiest cities in the world, one of the biggest cities in the world, and he just happens to be across the street from Harrison when he walks out of this hotel? Absolutely. But it's one that I can forgive very easily as just storytelling. You know, Dexter, even in the original run, even in the golden era of season 1 through 4, there's always been contrivances. It's just a matter of how good is everything else around it to draw attention to it. Because there's plenty that we've never really bothered to really dissect or call into question. Like, how many times has Dexter or another character shown up right at the perfect time where there's no discernible reason why they would be there just for something to happen? There's plenty if you wanted to go through with a fine-tooth comb. This is one that I easily forgave as the setup for where we're going to be going. Again, I think that the first 2 episodes is going to have most of these plot contrivances, and I'm hoping after episode 2, we're going to get back into more sensible storytelling. The jury is going to be out on that. So now with episode 2, which was titled Camera Shy, essentially we have Dexter here who has now found Harrison, and he's not trying to engage with him. He just wants to check up on him and make sure he didn't leave anything with what he assumes is him killing somebody. And I really liked the scene between James Remar and Michael C. Hall. I'm so glad that Harry is back, by the way. I know some people have opinions about Ghost Harry and they never liked it. I've always loved the way they've integrated James Remar. I think he is such a huge piece of the show, and I felt like his absence was absolutely felt in Dexter New Blood. So I love the fact that we have him back. And the conversation we have there where, again, Harry is being that kind of more warm father, telling him, you know, you need to go and find him, like he needs you. And Dexter pushing back saying, hey, he looks fine. I don't think he wants to see me right now. He's not ready for that, but I at least want to check up on him as a father should. And I even like the way, I can't remember if this was episode 1 or 2, but they're integrating some of the little bit that we learned in Original Sin with Harry's relationship with Brian Moser, and they showed the kid that played Brian Moser in Original Sin. So I'm intrigued on how much of that they're going to integrate as Original Sin continues to go on for multiple seasons with Dexter Resurrection. But nonetheless, cool detail there. And Dexter goes into this hotel, all the classic Dexter stuff that I love, where he just kind of swindles his way in to different ways. And I love the scene where he goes to the kitchen and people are in it. So he just goes to the bar and he's like, hey, when's the kitchen closing? 30 minutes. Okay, let me get a cheeseburger. Actually, let me get 2. Because Dexter eating was always like a big piece of his personality. So in episode 1, we got the Cubano scene with him doing that. And in this one, he's just sitting there devouring cheeseburgers because he's been eating bullshit for hospital food for the last number of weeks. I thought that was very funny. And that was a classic Dexter comedy moment. Can I get some more of them pickles? And eventually goes in and finds the one little spot of blood. But other than that, before you even get to that moment, him going into the hotel room, which has been caution taped off. I love the proud dad moment that he has, where he walks in and he's, looking around, and Harry's like, what do you see? And he's like, nothing. That's what's cool about this. Like, he did a damn good job. Attaboy. That was funny to me that, even though he's probably on the surface somewhat upset that Harrison still has dark urges and he's gone through and killed somebody now, the fact that he kind of is a little bit proud in a certain way, like, hey, it's like your son losing his virginity or something. You're like high five or whatever. It was a scene like that I thought had some good humor to it, where he's looking around, everything's super clean, and he's impressed with the way that he changed the shower curtain liner, and that was very funny. So those are the moments where I feel like they're bringing some of that classic Dexter charm that was very much absent from New Blood, that got a big smile on my face. As far as Harrison, we didn't get a whole lot of development with him in episode 2. He's just really nervous about these detectives, and for some reason he acts very fucking suspicious every time he's around them, stumbling over the cart whenever they're looking in the hotel room and looking at them like this as they're bringing through their witness. So he's not doing such a good job at blending in. Maybe the one piece of the code that Dexter wasn't able to teach him so much is how to hide in plain sight. But I like the little bit of extra development we get with him showing the kid Ninja Turtles and, being the babysitter and things like that. I'm curious to see where things go. It kind of reminds me of like Jesse Pinkman in, what was it, season 3 of Breaking Bad, where he starts to have that relationship with the girl and her son. So, the only real thing that we got as far as something different with him is he's being haunted by the image of this guy that he just killed. And clearly it's not sitting well with him, like the way that it used to with Dexter, as I already said. So he goes out on this little bender and eventually sees his father, which he thinks is just him imagining shit when it actually is. So very much looking forward to whatever episode they finally come face to face again. I'm sure that's probably not going to be until the later part of this season. That might even be the final episode and leads into whatever conflict is going to carry this over to a second season. But, interesting stuff so far with him. We get a little bit more with Uma Thurman, where she is going. I guess maybe this is the same guy that she just found the trophies for. She is essentially trying to like fire this serial killer. He's a guy that they're very intriguing with the dialogue they have, where there's some kind of an arrangement, some kind of a hiring process, or some kind of a job that he is doing for Uma Thurman and presumably Peter Dinklage. And all I can speculate on is that maybe Peter Dinklage is this rich guy that kind of commissions serial killers to bring him trophies. Like, he wants people to go out and kill certain people, but he doesn't want to be the one to do it. He just wants, he wants the satisfaction of knowing that he made it happen. And so whenever she gets the trophies, maybe that's something that he was withholding when he's supposed to turn them in. Something like that. We'll see. But very intriguing. And the fact she had that spiked bat and then he goes towards her and she just whacks him. Again, very, very curious what they're building very slowly with whatever this weird society is going to be. And then we get into The Dark Passenger. And I really enjoyed this element of this episode where, you have this guy who gets into an Uber driver's car. What do they call it? Your driver or your car or something like that. And very clearly there's something off with him. But you have the driver where he, asks like, hey, are you John? Yeah, I'm John. He gets in the back seat and he starts to drive away to this destination. And the guy in the back seat's conversation is starting to get a little bit weird. And then eventually he throws like this like metal rosary or something like that around it. It looked like it had a cross attached to it. And throws it around his neck and holds him there and tells him that you're going to go a certain way, you're going to go here. And I'm not 100% sure yet like what the MO is, what the driving factor is. I'm sure we'll find that out as Dexter continues to investigate this guy. I didn't know if it was like an immigrant thing, like he has an issue with immigrants or whatever, but he's alluding to, as a kid, something bad happened to him, and he blames this Uber driver, or all Uber drivers that he's killed so far. The only thing that bugged me about this, which again, kind of just convenient writing, at least... I don't understand why this guy would drive where the passenger is telling him to go. Like, you're in the middle of a very populated city. There's traffic everywhere. Like, yeah, you're scared and your adrenaline's pumping, but you got a guy who clearly can't kill you right then and there. And he's telling you, oh, just keep driving. We're going to go somewhere way off in the distance where nobody's at. Why you wouldn't slam on the brakes, get into a wreck on purpose, roll down the window and scream, something like that. That was the only part of that scene I had trouble buying into, but, can you explain it away with the guy was just so scared he wasn't thinking straight? Sure. They kind of address it later on with another character. But, we have another scene where a head is off, and it looks, again, the gore so far in the season is pretty top-notch. And Dexter finds out about this through an Uber driver because his truck has been towed. And... I loved the fact that he was such a petty bastard, the fact that he found out this killer is being dubbed the Dark Passenger, that pissed him off enough to put him on his radar. Like, it's not even that he really needs to kill anybody. It's not like the urge is building. Like, he very clearly is focused on Harrison. But as soon as he hears this guy has the moniker, the Dark Passenger, he's like, bitch, that's copyright infringement. I'm going to fuck him up. That was awesome. Again, love the fact that we're getting some of that really nice humor back. It's not quite as overt as the original seasons, but it's there. So I loved that. Even the scene that he has with Harry, where he's like, he calls him the Dark Passenger, and he's like, don't give him that name. That's my name. He's the imposter. That was so good. So I'm really into that part of it so far. Getting the Freak of the Week stuff back, which we didn't really have in New Blood again. Seeing Dexter on the hunt again, starting to live double lives and, draw people in and make friendships, trying to get details. Like that's classic Dexter stuff that I'm glad is back. I did call extreme bullshit on the fact that this Uber driver befriends him so heavily, so quickly. Like, again, contrivances that I hope get away from the show after the second episode. But you have this guy where he's like, hey, can you tell me your name really quick? And he says, Dexter. Okay, cool, get in. Sorry, I was a little bit weird back there. We got a serial killer who's murdering Uber drivers. And, he just sits in the back seat with a hoodie, but come to my barbecue tomorrow. Like, it was very, very quick. So, I don't think this character is going to be around as like a friend for the entire season. Maybe he will be, since he has this apartment that he's renting out now in this basement. But that I wish that could have breathed a little bit more and give me a little bit more of a believable explanation for why this guy's befriending Dexter so heavily and so quickly. But nonetheless, he finds out all these cool details about this Dark Passenger, where he wears like this little UV thing that whites out his face in security footage. Kind of an interesting thing I've never heard of before, but I'm sure is a thing. Him going online to this business and looking at the different people and the one guy that doesn't have an image and starts to do Google searches. Again, all classic Dexter elements that are working really well for me so far. And then we eventually end the episode on this sequence where he's pursuing this guy. He finds who he thinks is going to be this driver. And, you see an Uber driver like, hey, are you Jack? Yeah, I'm Jack. And then Dexter kind of jumps in like, hey, don't steal my car. Oh, sorry, man. And he walks down into the subway, and only because somebody hits him in his wound, he gets kind of dazzled for a moment and doesn't make it onto the subway. But there was kind of a peculiar conversation that ended the episode off that I was a little bit unsure of, where you have Harry asking him, like, basically saying, why did you prevent him from getting into that Uber driver? Like, what is this deal now where you're actually trying to save people? Since when does Dexter Morgan care about others? And he goes, since right now, and walks up the stairs, and the episode ends. Dexter's always cared about other people. Like, that's never his main motivating factor, but he's always done things to save other characters, save kids, whatever, save victims from whatever serial killer he's hunting. It felt odd to me. Maybe I'm missing something, that Harry would look at him, preventing him from getting into that Uber driver's car and preventing a murder to be able to continue to stalk him. Why he called that out as like some new development for Dexter. So I don't know, maybe one of you guys can tell me in the comment section, am I missing something? Like, I just didn't understand what was different about his approach there that merited that conversation to end the episode off, like Dexter's turning a new leaf or something like that. The only other scene that I completely forgot about that we'll end this off on is that we got one more moment with Batista where he's talking with the new sheriff of Iron Lake. And again, continuing to kind of have his suspicions and tell him, like, who is Jim Lindsay? Can you tell me about this guy? Oh, everybody loved him in town, him and Angela. There's this explanation that he's trying to build where Angela and his relationship was just so volatile and toxic that she would call his old co-worker, who's now a captain, try to get him outed or try to get him blamed for a series of serial killings to the level of like Jeffrey Dahmer, and also shoot him in the chest. Like, again, I don't like the explanation because it's just so ridiculous. Like, the fact that Batista, even if he believed 5% of that, how would that work? Like, how do you have somebody that's able to do that and not have charges brought against them? Like, okay, you falsely brought me down here and accused him of something that is very serious, and then you shot him in the chest, and you're just like, oops, got it wrong. Anyway, bye, guys. I was hoping that conversation would explain away some of that, or at least try to soften the edges on that. It really didn't. It just kind of continued to solidify that Batista's definitely got his suspicions. And I think eventually he's going to find Harrison. I think it's going to build throughout the season with whatever Dexter's doing. I really think that's going to be the main core element of however many seasons Dexter Resurrection runs, is us slowly building that ultimate confrontation between Batista and Dexter. And I'm totally here for that. So yeah, that's pretty much all my thoughts on the first 2 episodes, guys. Like, I have some concerns. I'm definitely still a little bit guarded. I don't want to let my guard down yet and have them hurt me yet again. I feel like Dexter's like that abusive husband, and I keep going back to him because he says he's not going to hurt me anymore. And then I end up in the ER with a black eye. I fell on the stairs. It's okay. Resurrection's coming out. He's different this time. I think there's a lot of potential. I think there's a lot of intriguing things being built. I have confidence that some of my issues with the writing in the first 2 episodes is going to start to disappear once we have set the stage and we're fully into these storylines for this season of Dexter Resurrection. I am still a little bit concerned about the 10-episode run. I hope that it's not going to feel rushed the way that New Blood did. That is one thing that I'm still a little confused by, why we're not getting a 12-episode season. But nonetheless, we won't know that until we get to episode 10. But yeah, I'm really intrigued so far. So guys, let me know down below. First of all, who are you as far as a Dexter fan? Which seasons are like your favorite? Or did you love New Blood? Did you hate New Blood? And what do you think so far about Dexter Resurrections, things that you like, things that you're fearful of, things you absolutely do not like? Let's talk about it down below. I will be doing weekly episode reviews as these air, and then I will probably redo some of my rankings after Resurrection airs, because now we have 2 brand new seasons to add in there. So if you're a Dexter fan, make sure you stick around for all of that. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my Dexter reviews. It's a playlist down here. I'm also going to put my most recent ranking of all of the seasons after New Blood for you to check out. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss all of my episode reviews coming out over the next couple of months. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.